Hello, everybody. Hi, Bonnet Heads. Hi, Allison. Hi, Jean.
Hi.
Good seeing you as always.
Good to see you too. Good to see you too. How are things?
I'm going to start with a deep question. We're just going to go straight to, let's cut the chit chat.
Okay.
And let's just get to the depth of the conversation right now.
Wow.
Here we go.
Scary.
Okay.
I know. Deep thoughts. How do you think you're going to be remembered?
Oh my
Boom!
God.
There it is.
Pamela.
There it is.
It's like a huge question. That's a huge
Like when we're gone.
Listen, I'm wearing my glasses today. Today's a smart episode.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's good because we've got the right guest for that. So, listen, how are we going to be remembered? I mean, I think on a really fundamental level where certainly in terms of the people we're talking to today and what we're doing, we're going to be remembered, or I'm going to be remembered for not necessarily for the podcast, although I hope people remember that, but for the work that I did 45 years ago on Little House. I think I've said for years, not to get morbid, but when I do leave this earth, the first line in my obituary will include Little House on the Prairie. There's no doubt in my mind about that. And I just think that's important to me that it does, because it's a central part of my life that has connected me to people and places that I never would have seen without this. It's been a great, great gift. How about you, Allison?
Well, I always remember the story. It's apocryphal, may be true. They buried Bela Lugosi in the Cape. I'm so relieved that currently no one knows the location of the wig. So at least I'll be spared that. It's going to be weird. I mean, I look at all the things I've done in my life and everything, and all my charity work and whatnot and everything, and so. But best remembered as
no question,
and it'll say Nasty Nellie Olson. From the word nasty will appear.
Absolutely.
In my, that is it, and I know what's going to happen. And they'll run the same clip. I mean, they'll be talking
about. Which one
is
is it?
It'll be down the hill in a wheelchair.
Okay.
It'll be.
Of course.
We're so sad. She's gone. We miss her so much. And here she is going down a hill in a wheelchair to a pond. That's what's going to happen.
Michael Landon said, I thinking about this, Michael Landon said, "Remember me with smiles and laughter, for that's the way I'll remember all of you. If you can only remember me with tears, then don't remember me at all." That's what he said. How Michael was a control guy.
I mean, that is kind of saying this is how it's going to be even after I'm gone. Yeah. But then it's true. It's so true. I mean, we were at the funeral and the thing, and it is true, because when you remember him, it's the high pitched giggle, and it's a hell of a thing. And people go, "Where's that from? Who read?" Well, he did. It's like, who did they quote at his funeral? Him.
Yeah.
No, I mean, yeah.
No, go on, Dean.
No, you go ahead. Oh, look at that. Where did that come from?
I know.
Look.
They're showing the plaque right here.
How awesome. See? Thank you very much, Tony. That was our Tony Sweet, our engineer, who found that quote and put it on the screen. Thank you, Tony.
Because he is a genius.
He
does that.
Ether.
That's what he does. Yeah. That's why we love him.
Well, today, we are talking to a person who really understands the Laura Ingalls Wilder legacy. Mm-hmm. From the studios of UBM Go in Burbank, California.
I'm sorry, what did you say? In Burger Bank? Did you say in Burger Bank?
I didn't.
Oh, that's what I heard. Maybe I'm hungry. Go ahead and say that again.
The tinnitus.
It is Burger Bank from now on. Are you kidding me? We're not even editing this out.
Down the street.
Okay.
I'm going to say it again. Here we go.
Okay.
From the studios of UBN Go in Burbank, California.
Okay, got
Visit Simi Valley presents a special event podcast. This is Little House 50 for 50. Yes, now I'm going to take out my fiddle and play the tunes for you all. During our early episodes, as you all know, for our podcast here, we're exploring the early origins and influences of Little House.
And we haven't gotten to Ed Friendly yet, or Michael.
Nope.
No, but not as a full-on topic, but I think that's going to change today.
We have a whole thing about them. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, not today. That will be another.
We're going
day.
further back. We're further back.
Little House's the history or the backstory of Little House's journey to television is a fascinating one. It is a drama unto itself, and it's a great story.
I can't wait to hear all about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're going to be spooling that story out over a lot of different episodes, but today's part of it.
That'll be season 2. It'll be all about the origin story of getting this show on the air.
Yeah.
But for today's guest has an understanding of that journey and an appreciation for history too. So let me tell you about our guest today. Our guest's career as an educator and author was first impacted by an introduction to history and literature in elementary school.
Yes.
At first an occasional reader, he became fascinated in history and historical fiction by the 3rd grade through exposure to the Civil War era, and his teacher's daily reading of the Little House books.
Yes.
Yeah, amazing.
Little House books were staples in classrooms all over America during the time.
Years.
So we know that this person is not a kid.
This person is not a child, were staples. Interesting podcast.
Yeah. Go ahead, Pamela. I'm sorry.
He understands that the Wilder stories in particular, were true.
Yeah, but they were not all the truth. Laura said that herself. They're the truth, but not all the truth. But enough.
Multiverse.
Yeah.
Laura multiverse. Yes.
In the Laura the Laura multiverse. There's a true version for sure. But our guest started writing letters to the sites of the Wilder stories, looking for more information. And he,
as a kid, he's like writing to the museums, like who's doing this?
Yeah, like fan mail, I suppose. And then he later visited them all, and he was invited by the Laura Ingalls Wilder Home and Museum.
Where's that?
Which is super cool.
Well, you've got the one in Walnut Grove, and then you have the one in De Smet.
I mean, that's the one. I mean, that's the one I'm thinking of.
I like that one. Well, because that's where they spent the most time. But of course, we wanted the show based on the day in Walnut Grove. So
just as a quick aside, I feel like Walnut Grove was a far more romantic name than De Smet. It just, there's just something, it's just something about Walnut Grove that is sort of warm and inviting, and De Smet sounds, I love De Smet, and we've visited there many times. And if you're listening in De Smet, we all love coming to De Smet, but there's something romantic in the sound of Walnut Grove.
And in the books about De Smet, it's winter and things are hard, and whereas Walnut Grove is kind of like, it's Miss Beadle, the school.
Sure. Anyway, go ahead, Pamela. I'm sorry.
We get involved in these things.
He was invited by the Laura Ingalls Wilder Home and Museum to write and publish his first research findings. And since then, he has juggled teaching career, journalism, composition, American literature, and U.S. history. Hello, do you understand why I'm wearing the smart glasses today? Along with researching, writing, and editing over 20 books. That's 20 books. The early era of his publishing career included the gathering of valuable oral history from friends and relatives of the Ingalls Wilder families. Amazing. And Garth Williams, illustrator of the Little House books.
I produced a documentary, Almanzo Wilder, Life Before Laura, that made extensive use of the Garth Williams illustrations, and they are extraordinary and evocative, and they are such an important part of the whole Laura Ingalls Wilder literary experience. Very important part. Go ahead, Pam. I'm sorry.
I look like the Nelly drawing.
You do. Okay. All right, here we go. Ready? I'm gonna spit this out, and I'm not gonna mess it up. Some of his Wilder related titles include, here we go: Laura Ingalls Wilder, a biography. Laura Ingalls Wilder, country. A Little House sampler, the story of the Ingalls family, and the selected letters of Laura Ingalls Wilder. That is a Laura Ingalls Wilder Lollapalooza right there.
Have you been to Lollapalooza?
I know who this is. He received the first Laura Ingalls Wilder Legacy Award from the Laura Ingalls Wilder Legacy and Research Association in 2010 in Mankato, Minnesota, a very famous place where Little House series fans know, at an event called, as you say, Laura-palooza, which is
awesome. I have been to Laura-palooza, I think twice. You've been to Laura-palooza.
Yes, absolutely.
There really is an event called Laura-palooza. For those of you who didn't know, there really is a thing called Laura-palooza, and it's awesome. It's a lot of librarians, but they go just nuts. They go nuts. Librarians gone wild for the weekend is basically what happens.
So, nobody, so I know who this is. Nobody is more loved in the Little House on the Prairie community for the depth of his knowledge about Laura and his generosity to share that knowledge with anybody who wants to know about it. Pam, bring this man on.
We love him. Yes, we know him and we love him.
And I'm so excited to talk to him too. Let's welcome to Little House 50 for 50, William Anderson.
Oh, welcome, Bill. There, look at you. There you are. Welcome, Bill. Welcome to 50 for 50. We're so excited to have you here. You are such an important part of the Laura Ingalls Wilder experience. As much as the series and the books are a different world, but you, for us who are a part of it, you are such an important piece of connective tissue in all of Little House. I mean, it's just so glad you're here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Pam. And thank you, Allison. I just feel honored to be here this evening talking to you about the kickoff or beginning of this memorable 50 years of Little House on the Prairie. It's going to be a fantastical year of celebrations.
It is.
And I think there are going to be so many thousands of people that are going to be thrilled and delighted to participate, and the cast members who are dynamite and the sweetest people working with the fans. I've worked different places with individuals, Allison and Dean and the late Hersha, who we miss, and Charlotte Stewart, and on and on. We always have a ball when we're at a Wilder gathering or a Wilder site. And the people that attend those events are simply ecstatic to be there. And this will be a landmark year.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Bill. We're knock on wood. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. They're an amazing group of people. It's true. It's all true, fans out there. They're lovely. They're lovely off camera. So Dean and Allison, how long have you known Bill?
Oh, good heavens!
I'm only going to call you by first and last name.
Bill. When did was it at that strange book fair out on the prairie somewhere, that library thing, or was it in Missouri? Was it at Laura's house? Was it at Laura's house in Mansfield, or was that the first time we met?
I can take a little credit for getting you there, Allison, because there were, in the early years of the TV show and long afterward, there were two camps.
Oh,
the book people and the TV people.
Ba-boom.
And I always thought the twain shall meet. And I have been on the board of the Laura Ingalls Wilder Home Association. It seems like since I was about 18 years old, but not that far back, but at least
nearly
a long time. Yeah.
Wow.
And we had an annual fall festival called Rocky Ridge Day.
Rocky Ridge Day.
And it was all very literary, and we would have artists there that had illustrated the Little House books. And I finally talked the board into inviting Allison and featuring Little House on the Prairie TV show at one of these autumn events.
And I'd done Walnut Grove. I did Walnut Grove in like...
It was around 1994.
Yeah, because I did Walnut Grove in like 91 or 92. So yeah.
Yeah. And then...
So was this before like all the fan events were started? Like this was sort of like...
I think this is early on in that adventure.
Oh, they'd never done it. And when I went to Walnut Grove, it was like a huge deal. They hadn't done it. It was just me, and it was a whole fluke. Bizarre thing. Yeah. So, it was you. It was you who said, bring her into the house.
a bigger visit for Allison, right synonymous with that Rocky Ridge Day. I was doing the Children's Literature Festival.
That's where that
another big confab for kids at Drury College.
That's the
so
one.
I said to the organizers there, we're bringing in Allison Arngrim. Would you like to have her also be at the Kid Lit Festival? And I had done an author visit at Laura Ingalls Wilder Elementary. This is in Springfield, Missouri. So I contacted them and I said, don't you think your kids would love to see Nasty Nellie in person?
Yes.
So I think Allison did 2 or 3 other appearances. And then the finale was our Rocky Ridge Day at Laura and Almanzo's home.
Yep.
We were getting thousands of people, but the day you were there, we broke records.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you were so dear with all the people in signed T-shirts and casts and lunchboxes and books. And
that
pictures.
was when we first hung out. You got me in there. That's right. You're the instigator on this one.
Yeah, and our board was very, very happy that we had done this big, giant leap. So a couple years later, when we were doing the official opening or dedication of the 1928 Rock House on Rocky Ridge Farm, which Rose Wilder Lane built for her parents as a retirement home. I said, well, why don't we now invite Dean? And Manley needs to be here. And Dean came.
If I had a nickel for every time I heard that.
Yeah, and I think you cut the ribbon, Dean. And
Yes. I love that
at the Rock House. Yeah.
I love that
restored Wilder home. And Dean, I will tell you that you broke all records for our bookstore. Farmer Boy just went out like hot pancakes, and you signed them and were posing for pictures, and you were a trooper as well. So eventually, over the years, we would stagger a year where we have it more literary, or Renee Grafe, the illustrator of some Wilder books. But we eventually had Charlotte and Doc Baker.
Yes, Kevin went. Kevin
I
Hagen.
always wanted to have.
You had Matt Labrato, or rather Pat Labrato last year, right?
Did you have Dabbs Greer too in the back in the day?
Point?
The Reverend, our Reverend.
I think he was gone at that time, but he was right from that area. He lived in the next
Yeah, that's right. He lived from Missouri.
Well, just a quick swing. I'm going to be there this fall. I just can tell you that I will be there in September of 24.
And well, I think I will be too, because we have our board meeting.
There you go.
And this will be huge because the book will be out by that time, right, Dean?
It will be. Oh, yes. Thank you.
Plug.
What a good plug, Bill. So thank you. Yes, my book, Prairie Man, My Little House Life and Beyond, will be out on June 25th of this year. And so I will have hopefully boxes of them available for people to potentially have if they want them while I'm in Mansfield.
And it will fly off the shelves like Farmer Boy did when you were first there. It will.
Yes, and people can go to the podcast website as well if they want to directly get linked to the book.
Yes.
Both of your books.
We're looking forward to Dean autographing his own memoir.
Yeah.
And you can still sign Farmer Boy, but this will be really special to have your book there for the first time at Rocky Ridge.
Always sign Farmer
Boy.
Yeah.
And I wish those 2 sweet teenage girls that we were at Heritage Hill.
Heritage Hill, another gorgeous place.
And there was a line of about 250 people, and it got to be 5 p.m., and Dean and I were just sitting at a table signing our books and Dean's pictures.
Yeah.
And these 2 sweet girls were in line. I kept watching them inch up. What do they have written on those T-shirts? And each one of them had a handmade T-shirt, and it said,
"Were these 2 of the Dean's Divas or something?" Or I'm wild about Manly. Oh, I'm wild. I think
there were Dean's Divas. There were Dean's Divas who love you. You had a club. You had a club.
What a group! Yeah, no.
And the cast, and I have been included in many of those. We've had some wonderful summer experiences going to restored villages that celebrate the Ingalls and Wilder eras. Genesee Village Museum,
which is a great location,
fabulous place.
Green Bay, over and over again. And then the individual book sites. So it's not a normal summer if you don't have a Wilder event to attend.
That's right.
Or 2 or 3.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
So we've had great times.
So, Bill, I'm just curious, when and why? Let's start with why. Why did you connect with the Laura Ingalls Wilder books? Or when did you, let's start with that. When did you connect with them?
Yeah, I want to know this too.
All right.
Little boy.
We were all squiggly 3rd graders at one point. Including me. And I like to have my parents read to me, but I was not an omnivorous reader until about 2nd or 3rd grade. And in my school, at least, right before lunchtime, our teacher read us a picture book or started a chapter book. And this usually coincided with what we were studying in social studies. We'd already done the Native Americans, so we moved into frontier living and pioneers. And our wonderful teacher said, the book that I'm going to start reading to you now will tell you more about pioneer life than our social studies book. And yes, it was Little House on the Prairie.
Wow.
And that was such an adventure story, crossing the creek and almost capsizing and losing Jack the bulldog and building a log cabin and digging a well. It really told our class what frontier was like. And so many adventurous things happened that we were on the edge of our seat. And we're thrilled with this story that took place around 1870, more or less. And the day that Jack got lost was tragic because the bell rang for us to go to lunch. No! And, Jack was so cool. He was like a character in the book.
Yeah.
So we came back after lunch and we begged our teacher to read the next chapter. We were pretty savvy because if we could get her to read more in the afternoon, we'd have less math to do. And she was always happy to oblige. And we did a lot of cross-curricular social studies work. Now, what 3rd grade class isn't going to love making butter and cornmeal muffins or cornbread?
Wow.
So we did that. We learned the songs that were in the book. We did a huge mural and United States map showing the Ingalls family's trek from Wisconsin to Kansas. So that was my baptism into the Wilder world.
Yeah.
And when we went to the library, everybody would go to the W section of the fiction books down on the floor at the tail end of the shelving. And we grabbed other books that Laura Ingalls Wilder had written. And I just got fascinated in her family's life, and I was learning a big significant portion of U.S. history because the Ingalls family were living out the Homestead Act of 1862, which President Lincoln had signed into law. So that was my deep, deep beginning with this famous series of books. And it was extra special to my classmates and I when our teacher said, Mrs. Wilder was the Laura that I'm reading you about. And the characters in these books really existed. They were real people.
Yeah.
And this is a true story written in fiction form. So that was an extra bonus. These were not invented tales by any means. They had a deep background in the Ingalls family life.
Bill, may I ask, where did you grow up? Where was this?
Michigan. And we had some neighbor friends in our hometown that were also Wilder fans. And one summer they took off on a trip out west. And when they got home, they told us we had the most cool Wilder experience. We went to Pepin, Wisconsin, because that's where Wilder was born, where the family emanated from. And we saw Lake Pepin, and we saw the site of the cabin. Nothing was there at that point. This is very early on, before a lot of the restoration and historical research was done in those sites. And then they went on to Walnut Grove, Minnesota, met the newspaper editor who told them how to get to Plum Creek and see the dugout.
Oh my gosh.
You had to go and ask somebody.
South Dakota.
Yeah.
And then on the way back from their trip, they stopped by at Mansfield, Missouri at Laura and Almanzo's Rocky Ridge Farm. And that was already established as a museum. Wow. So when we heard about that from our friends in Myers, oh boy, I wanted to go to those places. And I was reading more and more U.S. history, frontier stories, and so on. And my parents were so good about supporting my interests. When we went on vacation, we would stop and see forts or historical sites. And I was into Lincoln, too. So when I was in fourth grade, we went to Lincoln Land. And finally, I got to go to Laura and Almanzo's home in Mansfield, Missouri. Preserved like a history capsule. Wow. It did not need to be restored. It was just left as if they'd walked out. And everything was authentic in the house. All the furnishings.
I love going into that house for that reason. Like Bill. I mean,
Bill, the chief artifact of the whole books was there.
When you step into that house, you feel like they literally could be just outside. They could be down at the barn. And it's so charming.
I always think as if Almanzo had slowly driven Laura in their Chrysler car into Mansfield to go to the bank or the post office. And they didn't lock doors down in that part of the country. And we're just stopping in to see if they were around.
Yeah, right.
It's a very intimate visit to a literary shrine. But the cool thing is, it is like frozen in time. Nothing was ever removed from the house. And it is like stepping in at their home.
Wow. Wow.
So how did you become I want to know, how did you go from this to becoming the guy who writes about Laura Ingalls Wilder? I mean, you've written other books, but how did you go from this to then becoming really the foremost Laura book history dude? You were
Listen,
the Laura history book
dude. I think that I was in the right place at the right time. As I say, my parents enabled all of this interest that I had, just as yours did with acting. And you've told me a lot of wonderful stories about your mom and dad. And my parents encouraged me and got me to the places I wanted to go. And then my research, this is way before the internet, you had to write a letter. So our friends in Michigan had met Aubrey Sherwood in DeSmet, the editor of the DeSmet News, the founder of the Laura Ingalls Wilder Memorial Society in DeSmet, and he grew up down the street from the Ingalls family, knew all of them. Wow. So they said, you need to write Mr. Sherwood a letter. And he started to type letters back to me, and I would ask questions. And Nancy Coble, former editor of the South Dakota State Historical Society publication division, who brought out Pioneer Girl, Laura's long unpublished manuscript. Nancy came up with a name for that early group of people that were researching and memorializing Ingalls and Wilders. And she called them the first diggers for facts, information. And she included me in that. But I was a young kid, 10, 12 years old. But these people that knew the Ingalls family and the Wilders and were actively trying to establish something for their local towns, because so many tourists were coming there in search of the real Ingalls.
Yeah.
So I would write letters, and my dad said one time, my goodness, what's this letter that Bill has from the Kingsbury County Courthouse? What's going on here? And I had written there to ask when the Ingalls family had died, I knew enough you could, death records and so on. So my dad was calmed down. He just wondered why.
He knew you weren't going to jail.
The summons.
Yeah.
The big question I had, perplexing, where is Plum Creek in Minnesota? Because Wilder did not mention that very copacetic name, Walnut Grove. It sounds like it belongs in Massachusetts or New Hampshire. And I don't know why she left that out of the series, but I wanted to know, where is Plum Creek? So I just wrote a letter to state capital of Minnesota, St. Paul, Minnesota. And in longhand, probably on a piece of notebook paper, I said, my favorite book about your state is On the Banks of Plum Creek. And the Ingalls family lived along Plum Creek, but I can't find on any map of Minnesota where that might be. So I got they shuffled the letter over to natural resources and not a historical arm of the government. But I got back a very technical letter, and it said Plum Creek rises on longitude and latitude and flows southeasterly, and all this real technical description, but not the name of Walnut Grove.
The idea that Walnut Grove was not on the map, that nobody knew where Walnut Grove fit.
And you can sort of imagine that once you've been in
really
Walnut
small.
Grove, how
It's
you
really
could miss it.
Garth Williams went there when he was illustrating the books, but you see, he first visited Laura in Almanzo. So Laura said, well, we live near Walnut Grove, so be sure to go there.
Wow.
The creek is 2 miles north. And so when he made his expedition to the land of the little house books, prior to illustrating them, that's why they're so authentic, because he took this as a serious research job.
Yeah.
And before I forget it, this past October was the 70th anniversary of the new edition of Laura Ingalls Wilder's 8 books, all redesigned, the type reset, with Garth Williams' magnificent, historically based illustrations. And her books had been popular for 2 decades, but when these magnificent 1953 editions were republished, the interest and the sales of the books skyrocketed. And Barbara Walker, who wrote Little House Cookbook, she said to me recently, that was the biggest rescue of a series of books in literary history.
Oh, wow.
Because the illustrations were just so dynamic and engrossing. And should I give the statistic that I just learned, Dean?
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about it later, but I think it's, please share it.
But that's also the thing. The 50s, that was the next incarnation. The 30s, I said there was a huge explosion in the 50s, and that's it.
Yeah.
And that's when the first television overtures were made, and I'll tell you about that in a bit. But Ursula Nordstrom was the amazing, groundbreaking editor at Harper and Brothers, and she was Mrs. Wilder's editor, and she fairly deified Laura Ingalls Wilder. She got to work with all the books as they were being edited and published. They didn't need much editing. And Ursula, towards the end of World War II, had a brainstorm. And she said, there's going to be a huge influx of new babies when the war ends. They weren't called baby boomers at that point, but they became known by that term. And she said, I want to redo Mrs. Wilder's books so these new kids who will be reading by 1950 and on will have these fresh, beautiful editions.
This was a premeditated act.
A prescient move, yes.
It was a huge endeavor and very expensive.
Yeah, I bet.
And she asked Garth Williams to illustrate them. because he had just finished illustrating Stuart Little by E.B. White and later did Charlotte's Web. So she got the best of the best.
Yeah.
And when the books came out, the sales soared. Laura was 87 when she got the first box of her 8 redesigned books. And to celebrate this 70th anniversary, I did an article for South Dakota History, which just came out yesterday or today, tracing Ursula Nordstrom's gigantic plan, Garth Williams' journey and his research, and how he illustrated the books, many of them illustrated while he was living cheaply in Italy, which is ironic that these Midwestern books were illustrated in Italy.
It's like the most mind-blowing thing.
What a trip.
I looked up some stats.
Oh, yeah.
And in 1953, 500,000 Little House books had been printed and sold. And that's roughly 20 years after Mrs. Wilder's first book.
Sure.
By 1959, it was approaching 1 million. And I think that huge bump was because people were repurchasing the series and schools and libraries were buying them in bulk to accommodate all these baby boomer kids.
This is genius.
And as it went further, because I thought it would be interesting in my article to get a definitive answer about how many Little House books are now in print. So I contacted my editor at Harper, Tara Wykeham, and I said, Tara, you told me a couple years ago that to the best of your knowledge, 30 million have been sold, but I've seen fluctuating statistics coming from HarperCollins that 45 million and 60 million have sold. I'm doing this article. Can you get me a conclusive number of how many Little House books are out there? Tara came back with a staggering discovery. She said, our new technology here indicates there are 73 million books, products, adaptations, foreign translations, every conceivable version of Wilder books in North America or worldwide. And they did a lot of marketing during the 90s and early 2000s. So if it would be a address book or a calendar or something connected, a spin-off, she said, mind you, these could be other products and your books and other nonfiction books and a songbook and a cookbook and things that emanated from the original series. 73 million. And Tara said, very likely, the 60 million quote would be the Little House series itself within that 73.
Wow.
Pretty staggering for someone born in a log cabin and lived modestly most of her adult life until she published her first book at age 65.
There she is. Yeah, I find it so interesting, these sort of waves of the re-emergence of discovering the books again, along with the series too. Allison, you were talking about how the 50s there was a re-emergence. We were talking before about sort of the 70s there was a re-emergence.
Sure.
And I think during COVID there was a re-emergence too. And I wonder how many more sold during just, the COVID years.
Well, and Trip Friendly told me during that time, he experienced a great surge in countries we've hardly even heard of or localities around the world during COVID signed up to get the syndicated version shown there. So it was very comforting, and people were at home.
Yeah.
That's right.
And the Little House books helped people through COVID. They've had a great influence in so many ways, and they still do. And when I see families that, say, have flown from California to South Dakota, because I get reeled in almost every summer to go to Walnut Grove or DeSmet and that was last summer. And it warms my heart when I see these brothers and sisters and their parents. They're just enamored when they're on the prairie or walking through one of the Ingalls homes, and they're jabbering about things they remember from the books. And I just love to sort of eavesdrop and then strike up a conversation with them. So they're still very much treasured by families and not used as much in the school curriculums anymore. Yeah. But they're here to stay.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. While
go ahead.
Dean is here, I want to ask you something in front of him. What is your sense of who Almanzo really was, and how did people react when on the TV show his name was mispronounced as Almanzo?
Oh, I'm going to let Dean tell that one. You can save that for a special tidbit. But you can blame Lucy Lee Flip.
Well, that's what I always do.
We always throw Lucy under the
blame
bus.
Lucy Lee.
And listen, Bill, I don't know if you know my theory, but here it is, and I'm going to stick to it. For the TV show, he is Almanzo. For the book, he is Almanzo. That's it.
Multiverse.
Tomato, potato, potato.
And Allison, the other day, or yesterday maybe, all these blogs, or I don't know what they are, they appear on Facebook, and they're usually sensational.
Yes.
And negative.
Clickbait, yes.
Laura Ingalls Wilder's life was miserable because of her husband, Almanzo.
It was a terrible.
Who wrote that? That's out there?
A bot. It was clickbait. Laura Ingalls, it was miserable. Her life with Almanzo was... Because when she was first married, they were both sick and things were hard. They made it sound like Almanzo was bad.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well...
and you saw I jumped in. Did you see I jumped in and I commented on it?
You did. And I said, go girl. Thank you, Allison.
So, Bill, what is
it wasn't his fault.
Almanzo actually was? What is your sense of that?
I think he was very modern because their marriage
that's right.
was unusual. Yeah. And everybody knows the story about Laura telling the Reverend Brown, now, I don't want you using the word obey in our wedding service because if I thought that obeying Almanzo wasn't a good idea, I'm not going to say that I will do that. Mm-hmm. And I think they were a very companionable, I always use that word, couple. They loved horses. They loved farming. They worked as a team. Mm. And in those days, usually it was very male dominated. Mm-hmm. But Almanzo didn't dare buy a new harness or a new cow or a new horse without consulting Bessie. And that was his pet name for her. She was Laura Elizabeth.
Bessie.
And I think they worked as a wonderful team. Mm-hmm. On their Rocky Ridge farm, Laura's niche there was the poultry.
Oh, yes.
For several years, she was renowned for being a successful chicken farmer, essentially. Almanzo was
She invented her own feed. She invented her own chicken feed.
She invented
what? One time, they had a competition one season. Were the chickens more profitable, or was the milk and the cream
I remember
from the dairy cattle more profitable? And Laura said very happily, we found that it was just about a wash. We each made about the same.
Good for them. That's what they wanted, was to find that they had a wash. That's very companionable.
She was so into these chickens, she would examine what are they eating and which ones are making them lay more, which food substances in the feed are making it. And she created her own chicken feed mixture, and when she was writing for the farm page, she was telling other people how to make this chicken feed and what they should put in it to have more protein and would make them lay more. I mean, it was a whole thing. It was
in those early days. I'm talking about World War I era is when they really got serious about farming as a business, and they subscribed to all the state extension service information. They were very intelligent and very progressive about their farming. And their farm became somewhat of a lodestar for other people to check out. They had a lot of company and visitations because they were modern farmers, and it was, of course, a beautiful place as well. And they were quite in the agricultural area of Southwest Missouri, somewhat celebrity farmers. And this was enforced by Laura's writings in the Missouri Ruralist. Her first extensive writing was the job she held as a contributor to the Missouri Ruralist. It was, focused to farm families. And she wrote a lot of practical articles like Allison just cited. But she found another writing skill as an essayist. And she wrote very, very well thought out and well written essays about farm life, family life, right and wrong, appreciation of nature. And I call that her apprenticeship in the writing business. And Dean asked me in one of his questions, do you think Laura was very creative? And I think there were two components there. She was anxious to be successful. She had known what it was like to be a poor child in poverty and hardship. And I think that one of her goals was to inch up into comfortable middle classdom. And her writing for publication earned her modest fees for those writings. And then, of course, the big writer name in the family was their daughter, Rose Wilder Lane. And without Rose, Mrs. A.J. Wilder would not have been known outside of Southwest Missouri or their hometown of Mansfield. It was Rose Wilder Lane that nurtured and assisted her mother with the Little House books. We wouldn't have had those magnificent books had Rose Wilder Lane not sidelined periodically her own successful career to advise her mother and essentially be her mentor. So it's interesting. We think of our parents as our mentors. In the Wilder family, Rose mentored her mother. So we're going to have more with William Anderson on Little House 50 for 50 podcast presented by visitsimiValley.com right after this. Simi Valley, California invites you to see the place where it all began this March at the Little House on the Prairie 50th anniversary. Discover our stories, our from presidents to pioneers, visit iconic locations like the Reagan Library and much more. Make your own memories at visitsimiValley.com.
Be there or be square, baby.
It's like Manly is talking directly to me. I love it so much. I can't stand it. Bill, all right, here we go. We're gonna get into the nitty gritty here. Are you ready? You've met everybody, so I want to know who are your favorite people in the Little House world, book and series. Dun dun dun. No pressure.
Okay, I'm going to talk about the first diggers. I told you what that terminology meant.
Yes.
As a young boy, I got to visit all of the book sites. I remember my parents were in business. Every summer we went to Chicago. My parents went to the big shows in the merchandise mart to buy things for the next season for our businesses. And my mom and dad said, Bill, we'll be in Chicago. Why don't you go to DeSmet, but go on your own? We want you to learn how to travel by plane, and you got to learn sometime. So while the rest of my family was in Chicago, I got on North Central Airlines and landed in South Dakota and was met at the airport by residents of De Smet. De Smet is the most hospitable town. Amazing. And these people just took me in. And some of my best friends still live in South Dakota, and they're lifelong friends. And that group of people, Aubrey Sherwood, his wife Laura, his daughter and her family, I just felt like I had a whole extra group of friends and quasi-family in South Dakota and all these other places, because the first diggers were so hospitable, so proud of their connection with the Wilder books, so ambitious to make a beautiful experience for tourists. And Dean and I can tell you, at Almanzo's boyhood home near Malone, New York, that farm is just exquisite. And when I saw it the first time, the house was so ramshackle, it couldn't decide which side to fall down on. And from that almost ruin, the local people got together, and the farm is just so copacetic. It's so beautiful to be there. And Mansfield, Missouri, the same thing. We've done so much work there. And we've just rebuilt Almanzo's garage.
Oh, wow.
So it's all ongoing.
Nice.
And we have a very nice, new, state-of-the-art museum, archive, and visitor center.
Oh, it's huge. The museum is huge.
Yeah, it is.
It's huge. Lovely place.
But it's continual projects of that sort.
Yeah.
So I really value the people that I got to know through my connection. And then to top it off, my first summer in college in the 70s, I didn't want to go back home. I had such a good time at school. I thought, I don't really want to take summer school courses. So by then, I was pretty well known in De Smet, and I had written a few of these little booklets already, like the story of the Ingalls family. And the tourism was rising, the Wilder visitors. So Aubrey said, hey, we need more help this summer. Why didn't you come out for the summer and work for us? So that began my connection with De Smet. And once again, I was treated so beautifully. And so I gave tours, and I got to know a lot of the old timers that remembered the Ingalls family firsthand. This is in the 70s.
Wow.
So Bill,
Laura's mother and her sister were living in De Smet in the 20s, and her sister Grace was living in that area into the early 40s. So many people knew them and remembered them.
Yeah.
So this is also about the same time that Alex Haley wrote Roots. And family history and oral history was very much in vogue. So I had my little cassette tape player.
Oh, wow.
And interviewed a great deal of those old timers for their memories. And that was my experience in oral history. And I did a lot of research, collected a lot of the original artifacts that friends and family still had of the Ingalls. That was the nucleus of the collection there, which I think has 1,500 or 2,000 original artifacts from the family now.
1,000?
Wow.
Yes. Did I say that right, Alan?
1,500 or 2,000 artifacts? That's intense.
No, 1,500.
That's a lot.
To 2,000.
To 2,000. That's huge.
Yeah, that is a lot.
And it made me think, these were ordinary townspeople, but their neighbors and friends thought so much of the Ingalls people that they wanted a memento, and they were getting of the age where, what to do with this. And I would not, ask for them, but they would say, do you think your museum would like this? And I said, well, sure. So that helped with the getting into original things in the museum. And I had such a good time that summer that I went back each summer. And then when I started teaching, I thought, what am I going to do this summer? I'm broke. It's June 15th, and I've spent all my first year's salary. So I just went back for 2 or 3 more summers as a teacher and worked there and supported myself. And I've been, as I say, reeled in innumerable times back to South Dakota for this celebration or that event. And last summer, as I said, I was there. And that was the Garth Williams summer to celebrate the 70th anniversary. And the Laura Ingalls Wilder Memorial Society owns an amazing collection of Garth's art, at least one image from each of the books.
Wow.
And so that was a focus. And I talked about Garth at several sessions. And it's always good to see my remaining people in DeSmet. So that was very important for me to acquire information and firsthand accounts, which I tried to segue into the books that I wrote on the subject because it was too good to keep for myself. So it became a sharing of what these people shared with me. And there is a lot of the DeSmet people and the South Dakota people in my books.
Bill, nobody has touched this material the way you have. There's no question. It
just was a natural thing to do, Dean.
Well, but you've done it so naturally. You've done it so organically and so fully, so lovingly in the way you've done it. I'm curious because we are just about out of time, but I just want one quick question. Because you've watched all this, as you look back on it, and we're looking back over 50 years. What was the impact of the series on those places, on on the love affair that people have had with this material? I'm sure it's a mixed story, but overall, what do you think what's your take on the impact?
You are reading my mind because I said we're getting close to the end. I've got to interject. The summer of 1974.
Okay.
Being a college student, I missed the pilot, which was in March.
Right.
And I saw it later. It was phenomenal. And I think it was almost the next week or two that the pilot made such a good impression that the series was
they bought
signed.
it in 7 days. Yeah, they bought it in 7 days. Yeah.
And I was at I wanted to see it, of course, but it was a very important, semi-formal at one of the fraternity houses, and my girlfriend and I were going to go, so I had to decide, and I thought, well, I'll see this in rerun. And it was wonderful. Blanche Honolus was the scriptwriter, I believe, and she was very, very well known. So that summer, we heard a lot from our tourists about how much they liked the pilot. And then the next September or October,
September 11th,
the weekly series started.
Yeah.
And the tourism increased immeasurably the summer of 75.
Yeah.
Huge.
And just on and on and on.
Yeah.
And the TV show really added a great deal of luster and interest in those small towns of Walnut Grove and DeSmet. And at first, giving tours, we stuck to the books and what the book said about the 2 historic buildings, the Surveyor's House and the Ingalls home itself. And we were a little taken aback by what we eventually called the TV people.
The TV people!
We were speaking different languages.
That's me. Hi,
and
I'm representing them.
Yeah, we did a tourist. Now, who's this Carrie? Who's this Grace you're talking about? Well, she's the younger sister. She's not in the series yet. And, their grief was profound when we had to tell them that Albert wasn't an authentic Ingalls. They loved him, and they would want to talk about Albert, and we would have to say, well, he was a fictitious character, but isn't he great? You know? And DeSmet had an infrastructure of tourism, but I saw it rise greatly. So we were having Greyhound bus tours going up.
Yeah.
And they have a pageant there. And a bus tour would come from Sioux City, Iowa, to see the pageant, see the Ingalls homes, and go back on Sunday night. And we had study groups from universities. And I got to work with all those people. And I always say that was my apprenticeship.
Yeah.
And it was so much better than working at McDonald's for me.
I guess so.
And
Bill,
I really enjoyed your thing.
I need to jump in on you here.
Yeah.
Because we need to say goodbye. We have blown through our time here. We need to bring you back at another point in the season if you will come back. We are going to be doing 50 episodes of this podcast in the 50th anniversary year. So we can come. I would love to talk to you more about, we're having the friendlies come on. Trip and Rebecca are going to be coming on. And there will be others. And I'd love to have you come back and talk more about the origins and the building of this, along with your reactions to all of it. Well, as we said in the beginning, you are encyclopedic in your love of this. Pam, I think we need to say goodbye. Yeah, you have lived it.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thank you again, Bill, so much. We'll see you in March in Simi Valley at the Little House on the Prairie 50th anniversary cast reunion.
Are you going to come?
Are you coming?
Will you come?
Dean,
are you coming?
I felt like a certifiable moron. I asked you what the date was, and then I scrolled down my computer, and it was about 3 lines below. So I now have the date.
Yeah, you should check it out. I mean, I think you'd have a good time.
You should come.
Yeah, she's so geeked. She and some friends of hers are coming. They're going to be there.
Oh my God. Okay.
So I'll see what I can do.
All right,
and
good.
I want to come back and tell you how Walnut Grove responded to this, unless you have someone from there.
No, we want to hear your take on how Walnut Grove
that was a biggie. Yeah.
So, listen, thank you so much.
Yes, we'll have to do a part 2 and then a part 3 and 4 and 5.
Okay.
And this is not going to be 100 for 50. We'll do 100 for episodes for 50.
Yes,
Let's do it.
Thank you very much.
See you in
March?
At Marshfield at the Cherry Blossom.
Yes.
Oh, right.
Oh, yes.
So
be there
March,
too.
And we will see you in Missouri.
Much.
Absolutely, Bill. Absolutely. So, thank you. Pam, say goodbye for us.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us, letting you know that we are out there on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and we also have a website too. The handle is the Little House 50 Podcast, the Little House 50 Podcast, and littlehouse50podcast.com. Come and check us out. We've got merch. It's really fun. It's great. So good.
It's also good. It's so good.
It's so good. And links to all what we're doing and everyone. And if you want to contact us, go there. Anyway, thanks everybody for coming. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Prairie forever.